The king's dragon, Sunfire, too huge and heavy to be moved, and unable to fly with his injured wing, remained in the fields beyond Rook's Rest, crawling through the ashes like some great golden wyrm. In the early days he fed himself upon the burned carcasses of the slain. When those were gone, the men Sir Criston had left behind to guard him brought him calves and sheep. You must rule the realm now, until your brother is strong enough to take the crown again, the king's hand told Prince Aemond. Nor did Sir Criston need to say it twice, writes Eustace. And so one-eyed Aemond the Kinslayer took up the iron and ruby crown of Aegon the Conqueror. It looks better on me than it ever did on him, the prince proclaimed. Yet Aemond did not assume the style of king, but named himself only protector of the realm and prince regent. Sir Criston Cole remained hand of the king. Meanwhile, the seeds Jacaerys Valerion had planted on his flight north had begun to bear fruit, and men were gathering at White Harbor, Winterfell, Barrowden, Sisterton, Gulltown, and the Gates of the Moon. Should they join their strength to that of the Riverlords assembling at Harrenhal with Prince Daemon, even the strong walls of King's Landing might not be able to withstand them, Sir Criston warned the new Prince Regent. The tidings from the south were ominous as well. Obedient to his uncle's entreaties, Lord Ormond Hightower had issued forth from Aldtown with 1,000 knights, 1,000 archers, 3,000 men at arms, and uncounted thousands of camp followers, sellswords, freeriders, and rabble, only to find himself set upon by Sir Alan Beesbury and Lord Alan Tarley. Though commanding far fewer men, the two Allans harassed him day and night, raiding his camps, murdering his scouts, setting fires in his line of march. Farther south, Lord Costain had issued forth from Three Towers to fall upon Hightower's baggage train. Worse, reports had reached his lordship that a host equal in size to his own was descending on the Mander, led by Thaddeus Rowan, Lord of Goldengrove. Lord Ormond had therefore decided he could not proceed without support from King's Landing. "We have need of your dragons," he wrote. Supremely confident in his own prowess as a warrior and the might of his dragon, Vhagar, Aemond was eager to take the battle to the foe. "The whore on Dragonstone is not the threat," he said. "No more than Rowan and these traitors in the Reach. The danger is my uncle. Once Daemon is dead, all these fools flying our sisters' banners will run back to their castles and trouble us no more." East of Blackwater Bay, Queen Rhaenyra was also faring badly. The death of her son Lucerys had been a crushing blow to a woman already broken by pregnancy, labor, and stillbirth. When word reached Dragonstone that Princess Rhaenys had fallen, angry words were exchanged between the Queen and Lord Valerion, who blamed her for his wife's death. "It should have been you," the sea snake shouted at her grace. "Staunton sent to you, yet you left it to my wife to answer and forbade your sons to join her." For all the castle knew that the Princes Jace and Joff had been eager to fly with Princess Rhaenys to Rook's Rest with their own dragons. "Only I could lighten her grace's heart," Mushroom claims in his testimony. "In this dark hour, I became the Queen's counselor, setting aside my fool's scepter and pointed hat to lend her all my wisdom and compassion. Unbeknownst to all, it was the jester who ruled them now, an invisible king in motley. These are large claims for a small man, and ones not borne out by any of our other chroniclers, no more than by the facts. Her grace was far from alone. 4 living sons remained to her. My strength and my consolation, the Queen called them. Aegon the Younger, and Viserys, Prince Daemon's sons, were 9 and 7, respectively. Prince Joffrey was but 11. But Jacaerys, Prince of Dragonstone, was on the cusp of his 15th nameday. It was Jace who came to the fore now, late in the year 129 AC. Mindful of the promise he had made to the Maiden of the Vale, he ordered Prince Joffrey to fly to Gulltown with Tyraxes. Munkin suggests that Jace's desire to keep his brother far from the fighting was paramount in this decision. This did not sit well with Joffrey, who was determined to prove himself in battle. Only when told that he was being sent to defend the Vale against King Aegon's dragons did his brother grudgingly consent to go. Rhaena, the 13-year-old daughter of Prince Daemon by Laena Valerion, was chosen to accompany him. Known as Rhaena of Pentos, for the city of her birth, she was no dragon rider, her hatchling having died some years before, but she brought 3 dragon's eggs with her to the Vale, where she prayed nightly for their hatching. Lady Rhaena's twin, Baela, remained on Dragonstone. Long betrothed to Prince Jacaerys, she refused to leave him, insisting that she would fight beside him on her own dragon, though Moondancer was too small to bear her weight. Though Baela also announced her intent to marry Jace at once, no wedding was ever held. Munkin says the prince did not wish to wed until the war was over, whilst Mushroom claims Jacaerys was already married to Sarah Snow, the mysterious bastard girl from Winterfell. The Prince of Dragonstone also had a care for the safety of his half-brothers, Aegon the Younger and Viserys, aged 9 and 7. Their father, Prince Daemon, had made many friends in the free city of Pentos during his visits there, so Jacaerys reached across the narrow sea to the prince of that city, who agreed to foster the two boys until Rhaenyra had secured the Iron Throne. In the waning days of 129 AC, the young princes boarded the Cog Gay abandoned Aegon with Stormcloud, Viserys clutching his egg to set sail for Essos. The Sea Snake sent 7 of his warships with them as escort, to see that they reached Pentos safely. Prince Jacaerys soon brought the Lord of the Tides back into the fold by naming him the Hand of the Queen. Together he and Lord Corlys began to plan an assault upon King's Landing. With Sunfire wounded near Rook's Rest and unable to fly, and Tessarion with Prince Daeron in Aldtown, only 2 mature dragons remained to defend King's Landing. Dot and Dreamfire's rider, Queen Helena, spent her days in darkness, weeping, and surely could not be counted as a threat. That left only Vhagar. No living dragon could match Vhagar for size or ferocity, but Jace reasoned that if Vermax, Syrax, and Caraxes were to descend on King's Landing, even that hoary old bitch would be unable to withstand them. Mushroom was less certain. 3 is more than 1, the dwarf claims to have told the Prince of Dragonstone, but 4 is more than 3, and 6 is more than 4, even a fool knows that. When Jace pointed out that Stormcloud had never been ridden, that Moondancer was but a hatchling, that Tyraxes was far away in the Vale with Prince Joffrey, and demanded to know where Mushroom proposed to find more dragons, the dwarf tells us he laughed and said, "Under the sheets and in the woodpiles, wherever you Targaryens spilled your silver seed." House Targaryen had ruled Dragonstone for more than 200 years, since Lord Aenar Targaryen first arrived from Valyria with his dragons. Though it had always been their custom to wed brother to sister and cousin to cousin, young blood runs hot, and it was not unknown for men of the house to seek their pleasures amongst the daughters, and even the wives, of their subjects, the small folk who lived in the villages below the Dragonmont, tillers of the land and fishers of the sea. Indeed, until the reign of King Jaehaerys, the ancient right to the first night had been invoked mayhaps more oft on Dragonstone than anywhere else in the Seven Kingdoms, though good Queen Alysanne would surely have been shocked to hear it. Though the first night was greatly resented elsewhere, as Queen Alysanne had learned in her women's councils, such feelings were muted upon Dragonstone, where Targaryens were rightly regarded as being closer to gods than the common run of men. Here, brides thus blessed upon their wedding nights were envied, and the children born of such unions were esteemed above all others, for the lords of Dragonstone oft celebrated the birth of such with lavish gifts of gold and silk and land to the mother. These happy bastards were said to have been born of dragonseed, and in time became known simply as seeds. Even after the end of the rite of the first night, certain Targaryens continued to dally with the daughters of innkeeps and the wives of fishermen, so seeds and the sons of seeds were plentiful on Dragonstone. It was to them that Prince Jacaerys turned, at the urging of his fool, vowing that any man who could master a dragon would be granted lands and riches and dubbed a knight. His sons would be ennobled, his daughters wed to lords, and he himself would have the honor of fighting beside the Prince of Dragonstone against the pretender Aegon II Targaryen and his treasonous supporters. Not all those who came forward in answer to the prince's call were seeds, nor even the sons or grandsons of seeds. A score of the queen's own household knights offered themselves as dragon riders, amongst them the Lord Commander of her Queensguard, Sir Stephen Darklan, along with squires, scullions, sailors, men-at-arms, mummers, and 2 maids. The sowing of the seeds, Munkin names the triumphs and tragedies that ensued, crediting the notion to Jacaerys himself, not Mushroom. Others prefer the red sowing. The most unlikely of these would-be dragon riders was Mushroom himself, whose testimony speaks at length of his attempt to mount Old Silverwing, judged to be the most docile of the masterless dragons. One of the dwarf's more amusing tales, it ends with Mushroom running across the ward of Dragonstone with the seat of his pantaloons on fire, and nigh drowning when he leapt into a well to quench the flames. Unlikely, to be sure. But it does provide a droll moment in what was otherwise a ghastly business. Dragons are not horses. They do not easily accept men upon their backs, and when angered or threatened, they attack. Munkin's true telling tells us that 16 men lost their lives during the sowing. 3 times that number were burned or maimed. Stefan Darklin was burned to death whilst attempting to mount the dragon Seasmoke. Lord Gorman Massey suffered the same fate when approaching Vermithor. A man called Silver Dennis, whose hair and eyes lent credence to his claim to be descended from a bastard son of Maegor the Cruel, had an arm torn off by Sheepstealer. As his son struggled to staunch the wound, the cannibal descended on them, drove off Sheepstealer, and devoured father and sons alike. Yet Seasmoke, Vermithor, and Silverwing were accustomed to men intolerant of their presence. Having once been ridden, they were more accepting of new riders. Vermithor, the old king's own dragon, bent his neck to a blacksmith's bastard, a towering man called Hugh the Hammer or Hard Hugh, whilst a pale-haired man-at-arms named Ulf the White, for his hair, or Ulf the Sot, for his drinking, mounted Silverwing, beloved of good Queen Alysanne. And Seasmoke, who had once borne Laenor Valerion, took onto his back a boy of 10 and 5 known as Adam of Hull, whose origins remain a matter of dispute amongst historians to this day. Adam and his brother, Alan, 1 year younger, had been born to a woman named Marilda, the pretty young daughter of a shipwright. A familiar sight about her father's shipyards, the girl was better known as Mouse, for she was small, quick, and always underfoot. She was still 16 when she gave birth to Adam in 114 AC, and barely 18 when Alan followed in 115. Small and quick as their mother, these bastards of Hull were both silver of hair and purple of eye, and soon proved to have sea salt in their blood, as well, growing up in their grandsire's shipyard and going to sea as ship's boys before the age of 8. When Adam was 10 and Alan 9, their mother inherited the yards upon her own father's death, sold them, and used the coin to take to the sea herself as the mistress of a trading cog she named Mouse. A canny trader and daring captain, by 130 AC Marilda of Hull owned 7 ships, and her bastard sons were always serving on one or the other. That Adam and Alan were dragonseed no man who looked upon them could doubt, though their mother steadfastly refused to name their father. Only when Prince Jacaerys put out the call for new dragon riders did Marilda at last break her silence, claiming both boys were the natural sons of the late Sir Laenor Valerion. They had his look, it was true, and Sir Laenor had been known to visit the shipyard in Hull from time to time. Nonetheless, many on Dragonstone and Driftmark were skeptical of Marilda's claim, for Laenor Valerion's disinterest in women was well remembered. None dared name her liar, however. For it was Laenor's own father, Lord Corlys himself, who brought the boys to Prince Jacaerys for the sowing. Having outlived all of his children and suffered the betrayal of his nephews and cousins, the sea snake seemed more than eager to accept these newfound grandsons. And when Adam of Hull mounted Sir Laenor's dragon, Seasmoke, it seemed to prove the truth of his mother's claims. It should not surprise us, therefore, that Grand Maester Muncan and Septon Eustace both dutifully assert Sir Laenor's parentage. But Mushroom, as ever, dissents. In his testimony, the fool puts forth the notion that the little mice had been sired not by the sea snake's son, but by the sea snake himself. Lord Corlys did not share Sir Laenor's erotic predispositions, he points out, and the Hull shipyards were like unto a second home to him, whereas his son visited them less frequently. Princess Rhaenys, his wife, had the fiery temperament of many Targaryens, Mushroom says, and would not have taken kindly to her lord husband fathering bastards on a girl half her age, and a shipwright's daughter besides. Therefore his lordship had prudently ended his shipyard trysts with Mouse after Alan's birth, commanding her to keep her boys far from court. Only after the death of Princess Rhaenys did Lord Corlys at last feel able to bring his bastards safely forward. In this instance, it must be said, the tale told by the fool seems more likely than the versions offered by Septon and Maester. Many and more at Queen Rhaenyra's court must surely have suspected the same. If so, they held their tongues. Not long after Adam of Hull had proved himself by flying Seasmoke, Lord Corlys went so far as to petition Queen Rhaenyra to remove the taint of bastardy from him and his brother. When Prince Jacaerys added his voice to the request, the Queen complied. Adam of Hull, dragonseed and bastard, became Adam Valerion, heir to Driftmark. Yet that did not write an end to the red sowing. More, and worse, was yet to come, with dire consequences for the 7 kingdoms. Dragonstone's 3 wild dragons were less easily claimed than those that had known previous riders, yet attempts were made upon them all the same. Sheepstealer, a notably ugly, mud-brown dragon hatched when the old king was still young, had a taste for mutton, swooping down on shepherds' flocks from Driftmark to the Wendwater. He seldom harmed the shepherds, unless they attempted to interfere with him, but had been known to devour the occasional sheepdog. Grey Ghost dwelt in a smoking vent high on the eastern side of the Dragonmont, preferred fish, and was most oft glimpsed flying low over the narrow sea, snatching prey from the waters. A pale grey-white beast, the color of morning mist, he was a notably shy dragon who avoided men and their works for years at a time. The largest and oldest of the wild dragons was the cannibal, so named because he had been known to feed on the carcasses of dead dragons, and descend upon the hatcheries of Dragonstone to gorge himself on newborn hatchlings and eggs. Coal-black, with baleful green eyes, the cannibal had made his lair on Dragonstone even before the coming of the Targaryens, some smallfolk claimed. Grand Maester Munkin and Septon Eustace both found this story most unlikely, as do I. Would-be dragon-tamers had made attempts to ride him a dozen times. His lair was littered with their bones. None of the dragonseeds were fool enough to disturb the cannibal, any who were did not return to tell their tales. Some sought the Grey Ghost, but could not find him, for he was ever an elusive creature. Sheepstealer proved easier to flush out, but he remained a vicious, ill-tempered beast, who killed more seeds than the 3 castle dragons together. One who hoped to tame him after his quest for Grey Ghost proved fruitless was Alan of Hull. Sheepstealer would have none of him. When he stumbled from the dragon's lair with his cloak of flame, only his brother's swift action saved his life. Seasmoke drove the wild dragon off as Adam used his own cloak to beat out the flames. Alan Valerion would carry the scars of the encounter on his back and legs, for the rest of his long life. Yet he counted himself fortunate, for he lived. Many of the other seeds and seekers who aspired to ride upon Sheepstealer's back ended in Sheepstealer's belly instead. In the end, the brown dragon was brought to heel by the cunning and persistence of a small brown girl, of 6 and 10, who delivered him a freshly slaughtered sheep every morning, until Sheepstealer learned to accept and expect her. Munkin sets down the name of this unlikely dragonrider as Nettles. Mushroom tells us the girl was a bastard of uncertain birth called Nettie, born to a dockside whore. By any name, she was black-haired, brown-eyed, brown-skinned, skinny, foul-mouthed, fearless. And the first and last rider of the dragon Sheepstealer. Thus did Prince Jacaerys achieve his goal. For all the death and pain it caused, the widows left behind, the burned men who would carry their scars until the day they died, 4 new dragon riders had been found. As 129 AC drew to a close, the prince prepared to fly against King's Landing. The date he chose for the attack was the first full moon of the new year. Yet the plans of men are but playthings to the gods. For even as Jace laid his plans, a new threat was closing from the east. The schemes of Otto Hightower had borne fruit. Meeting in Tyrosh, the High Council of the Triarchy had accepted his offer of alliance. 90 warships swept from the stepstones under the banners of the 3 daughters, bending their oars for the gullet. And as chance and the gods would have it, the Pentoshi cog Gay abandoned, carrying 2 Targaryen princes, sailed straight into their teeth. The escorts sent to protect the cog were sunk or taken, the Gay abandoned captured. The tale reached Dragonstone only when Prince Aegon arrived desperately, clinging to the neck of his dragon, Stormcloud. The boy was white with terror, Mushroom tells us, shaking like a leaf and stinking of piss. Only 9. He had never flown before. And would never fly again, for Stormcloud had been terribly wounded as he fled the Gay abandon, arriving with the stubs of countless arrows embedded in his belly, and a scorpion bolt through his neck. He died within the hour, hissing as the hot blood gushed black and smoking from his wounds. Aegon's younger brother, Prince Viserys, had no way of escaping from the cog. A clever boy, he hid his dragon's egg and changed into ragged, salt-stained clothing, pretending to be no more than a common ship's boy, but one of the real ship's boys betrayed him, and he was made a captive. It was a Tyroshi captain who first realized whom he had, Munkin writes, but the admiral of the fleet, Sheriko Lohar of Lee, soon relieved him of his prize.